Dragon Warriors is the key to a magic world, a land of cobwebbed forests and haunted castles, a land where dire monsters lurk in the shadows of the night, where hobgoblins shriek across the bleak and misty moors, where wizards and armoured warriors roam dank dungeons in their quest for gold and glory, the realm of your imagination. This first book gives you the essential rules for you and your friends to enter this world and become the mighty heroes of fantasy. Maps, encounter charts, a rich collection of bloodthirsty monsters, tactical guides and a complete scenario for your first adventure. 10 minutes is all it takes to commence battle with your first foe. Only your own skill and daring and the decisions you make will stand between you and 100 hideous deaths. The authors of the series, Dave Morris and Oliver Johnson, first met at Oxford University for a mutual interest in role-playing games. Since then they have worked on a freelance basis, devising, developing and writing numerous solo fantasy game books and contributing to a specialist fantasy magazine. Dave Morris now works full-time as a writer. Oliver Johnson works as an editor of Corgi Books. Well, that was a reading from Dragon Warriors Book 1. I came across it again whilst rooting around looking for Reaper and read, I don't know if that was off the back cover now or just inside the front cover, but I thought it was quite evocative and decided it would be fun just to do a little reading and chuck it into the podcast. So hope you enjoyed that. It's kind of an interesting little system. I read through it and I think it might be a little bit whiffy because you have to roll to hit. It seems quite hard to hit. You have an attack value and there's a sort of a defense value. I can't remember what they're called, and you have to roll under the difference. Then if the defender has armour, you have to defeat their armour roll. Quite interestingly, depending on the type of weapon you use, you are more or less effective at bypassing the armour, which I thought, that adds potentially a nice little bit of flavour. And then your type of weapon determines the amount of damage that you do once you've bypassed the armour. So I could see combats probably involving less combatants and being a little bit more to and fro, but I'm quite curious. I've picked it up and looked at it before and more or less rejected it. I had a re-released version, a big old hardback. There was loads and loads in there, and part of what I like about this original book is, once again harping on about the nostalgia, but it's a small corgi book, a very unassuming paperback. It's just got the barbarian and knight character classes in there. So reading through it and wondering how available and what kind of interest there was still in this game, I came across a website called Cobwebbed Forest. It's kind of put together by a fan, and there's a lot of content on there, and it's got that typical fan website sort of feel to it. Loads of information, not super good looking or slick in any way, but quite charming nonetheless, and a really valuable resource if you're interested in finding out about the game and perhaps exploring it a bit. It's another one of these things that when I fancy a change of pace or do something different, it's on my list of things to check back into at some point. I've got a great fondness for this book. Just the feel of it, the illustrations are really nice, and some of the rules are portrayed in a cartoon strip kind of way, which is a little bit different, and I'm surprised we don't see that a little bit more in some modern games. I think it would be a good way to go. Not saying I haven't seen it, but I can't recall a game of late that used a kind of comic strip approach to explain the rules. I think it lends itself to the hobby, and it's something I'd love to see a little bit more of. Missed out on some RPGs lately because Easter, my brother and my eldest son have been away, so we've had to postpone a couple of RPG sessions. But I've caught up a little bit with some gaming, in particular, getting through some of that Shelf of Shame. I mentioned that before, and Blood Bowl has been back to the table now. I've got a call in from Carl. He's made the effort and called in about Blood Bowl. He is quite famously a Warhammer fantasy fan. He's a bit of an Anglophile. I think he likes some of that Games Workshop stuff.
Hey, Colin, I like that you mentioned Blood Bowl. Curiously enough, in our Warhammer Fantasy ongoing campaign, The Enemy Within, the players in, I think it's in the Powers Beyond the Throne, there's a chance where you get to watch and bet on a snot ball tournament for the carnival, and I guess if you win the snot ball tournament at Middenheim, then you can go on to bigger, better things in the Empire. But it's called snot ball, but it's Blood Bowl, and the players infiltrated into a team, and we played. We did run. There's like a quick way to run it and a more advanced, a la Blood Bowl way to run it. I thought it was funny because you said, yeah, you want to score, but the players got involved in beating up the other team instead. So kind of funny, just like Blood Bowl. And we all realized that it was a Blood Bowl because we're all big fans of the Empire and the Old World and Warhammer Fantasy.
First of all, then, a big thanks to Carl, aka the GMologist, and you can catch up with his Warhammer exploits on the GMologist Presents, where he does quite a lot of unboxings and is a master at recapping his games. Something I'm pretty terrible at. I don't know if I forget, or I don't know what it is. I don't really forget what goes on. I don't know, maybe I just don't practice enough, and perhaps it's something I could do. There's normally the next thing comes along and ideas bubble into my mind, and yeah, I don't want to ramble on for too long, but I'm a listener and I look forward to the exploits of Carl's players in that ongoing Warhammer campaign that he's got. Especially as recently there's been a little bit more talk about Warhammer amongst our own group. I don't know if it's because we've been playing Man of War and Blood Bowl. Kev, the Dungeon Muser, has also been talking about it. So it seems to be going through a little bit of a cycle of interest. My brother's got a load of the stuff, and he seems quite keen to play it. I know he's jumped into an online game, so he's going to get himself a little bit more familiar with the rules. But at the same time, he's a bit torn, like most of us. We've got our own projects. He's a couple of game designs he's been working on, and you know, you've only got so many gaming slots. So do you work on your own design, or do you run a game that you'd like to run, like Warhammer, especially when my youngest is expressing an interest in it as well. It's it's the same old story. I say it time and time again. Too many games, not enough time. And the setting as well, I even thought about whether I could take some of that setting and the old world and that Warhammer vibe, because growing up in the UK, it is, well, in my personal history of growing up in the UK, that Games Workshop is really in my blood, and it's no effort for me to kind of conjure that up in my players as well, because it's a similar story for them. So yeah, the possibilities of running it with another system, even if I didn't use the Wolfrup, which is Warhammer Fantasy Role Playing, for those that don't know. It also, talking of settings, I've got another call from Carl, but I'm going to leave that to my next episode, I think, because I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the Iron Kingdoms. Now, I've got to say, I am painfully aware that this episode is a bit of a Frankenstein's monster. Bits of this and that chucked together and all sewn up and, well, finally, hopefully, breathed into some kind of life. Now, just to make matters worse, I've got another bit to stitch on, as it were, into the episode, and this was where I was rambling about some thoughts around miniatures, and then miniature gaming, war gaming. I touch on Reaper, and then get into shock horror, chainmail, and OD&D, in fact. So I'll go from Blood Bowl all the way through to chainmail, work that one out. Anyway, I thought it was just about worthy of inclusion, so here we go. If you're a person who likes miniatures, you will probably be aware that the Blood Bowl miniatures in the current version of the game, I think are generally really nice. There's a few teams I think that are a little bit lackluster, but the quality of these kits now is astounding. They go together. Well, in my experience, I've been assembling one of the Imperial teams, and did a little bit on an ogre, and something else I put together a little while ago, and I've just been impressed in the way these things are crafted from basically an engineering and production point of view. It's top notch. When I think about the first plastic figures back in the 80s, there was a Skeleton Horde set, which was an early miniature, but there was these couple of dwarfs, and I believe they were called Drastic Plastic. Really simple figures. I think I still got that first plastic dwarf somewhere, and that was shortly followed by a plastic orc set, and that plastic orc really opened my eyes to the possibilities of kind of customizing figures. It became much easier using polystyrene cement to customize your figures. You could trim them quite easily. Not that lead was super hard, but the problem with lead was when you was customizing, you really needed to kind of pin the joints of your miniatures, because super glue, it's a kind of a very brittle bond with metal, and the weight of these figures, any time you even kind of a bit of rough handling, it would quite easily like shock a figure, and an arm or a head would drop off. You needed to be using epoxy resin or really good pinned joints. Just sometimes, especially for a larger figure with heavier parts, almost the weight of the arm could almost pull an arm off of a bigger figure, or like the wing of a dragon. The plastics with the polystyrene cement meant, because you've got a chemical reaction and like a welded joint, it just really opened up these possibilities. And I was getting things like ostriches and miniature rhinos from like kids' zoo toys, putting like a howdah on top and making ostrich riders and rhino riders, sculpting bits onto, you know, these zoo animals, and just doing all this customization, sculpting saddle bags and saddles and bridle and all of that, you know, really getting into it. Little balsa wood constructions to make kind of firing platforms for like ballista on the back of these huge kind of monsters, and then making up my own stats, and that was before Warhammer really took on this kind of this like lockdown spirit with codexes for different armies. Back in the day, we were just like chucking everything together, and that's part of the reason why I really enjoy my recent plays of Dragon Rampant, because it reminds me of kind of the early days of Warhammer, where it didn't matter what figures you had, you just kind of put it all together and came up with a creative reason for why your army was the way it was. Talking of early days of Warhammer, whilst we're on the subject, I broke out my copy of 2nd edition Reaper, which was Rick Priestley and Richard Priestley, Rick, and Richard Halliwell. I don't think he tended to call himself Rick so much, but there you go. Designers, both ended up working at Games Workshop. I don't know if they were involved with the formation of it so much. I'm not too sure. But looking at those old rules, there's, for a booklet, I think it was £2.95. It's still got a price tag on it. It's all a typed font and some sketchy line art in there. Combat resolution tables, all that goodness, and you'd be amazed at what was in there. It had this whole spell design kind of system. Everything you had to kind of like point out. Armor was broken down into parts of the body, and to come up with what was it? There was a save value and a combat. You had a CV and an SV. Combat value, I believe, and a save value. There was quite a lot of calculation and preparation went into preparing the forces at play, and got that real traditional idea of giving orders to the troops, written orders to units, and play involving an umpire and a kind of scenario and this sort of arbitration of the rules with an independent umpire. It's quite interesting to read these old books sometimes, and it makes me kind of curious to perhaps have a look at the often talked about chainmail, which is not something I've ever done, and I've only sort of glimpsed OD&D, so perhaps I should catch up with Daniel from the Bandits Keep, his exploits, a fellow podcaster and YouTuber. He is pretty well known, I would say, for his love of OD&D and chainmail, and how you can take that basic original kind of system and use it for pretty much anything you could want to do in your games. And if you take chainmail and OD&D, well, that's your wargaming and your RPG, and it's got all your bases covered. So perhaps when I've got a little bit of time, I will investigate that and see. Yeah, maybe there is some scope, and it'll be a fun thing to explore. And it just occurs to me that it's not something I've really done, and I haven't really got a particularly good reason why I haven't. So yeah, watch this space. So as this episode draws near to a close, I'd like to include a couple of calls for some buddies of mine. Spencer, aka Free For All of Keep Off the Borderlands, and Safer of Safer Fantasy Crafting. I've recently hit my 500 episodes, and at times it feels like I've been podcasting forever, and at other times it's flown by. It does take a little bit of staying power. I'm not entirely sure these congratulations are all that worthy, but I have at times thought about knocking it on the head, as they say, but only because I wonder if I'm adding much to the conversation at times. And yeah, I try not to self-edit, and I've been surprised over the years what people have actually said they enjoyed listening to. So I try and leave decisions about whether to listen or not to the listener. And if I don't put something out there, well, then they haven't got that choice. So whilst I've got time and the inclination, it seems like I may as well just carry on. And I don't know, it does help me to stay in the loop with the hobby, and you know, if a few people enjoy it, really, that's good enough. No point measuring yourself up to the big boys that are, you know, going all guns blazing and making this a kind of full-time job. It can be a lot of work, and I take my hat off to them. But big thanks to Spencer and Safer for their calls, especially as they mentioned, it is none too easy nowadays. But some more about that a little bit later on. Over to you guys.
Hey Colin, I just wanted to congratulate you on this monumental milestone, the incredible achievement of reaching 500 episodes. Wishing you a happy half millennium.
Hello, Colin. It's just Cypher here. I hope this message gets to you, man, because this is a real clawed on trying to send a message through this Spotify for podcasters website. But anyway, I just want to say, man, congratulations, 500 episodes. Amazing, man. Amazing. What an achievement. I'll quickly do the maths. I mean, what, 25 for me, 500 for you? I could live 200 lifetimes and never achieve that. Just astounding. You actually kind of caught me out, actually, with all your chopping and changing. I thought, oh, suddenly I realised I thought you were doing an Orwellian fixing of history, but I've realised that you've actually been having your own little time travel adventure there, haven't you, Colin? And within your own podcast, you've actually been jumping the timelines, jumping backwards and forwards, having little time slips. So it kind of caught me out, but yeah, nice one, nice bit of art there. But all the best to you, mate. Fantastic, well done. Really just want to congratulate you. Take care, man. All the best. Bye-bye.
It's really great that people have taken the time to call in, and it is increasingly, it seems, a little bit more difficult. My recommendation would be just record something on a device, a little MP3 file, attach it to your humble email, send it across to me at spikepitpodcast@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can always direct message me on a Discord, such as the Audio Dungeon or Dungeon Musings. I'm not on many, and I don't spend a lot of time trolling through that stuff, but I do find that quite convenient. It's all done through your phone, usually. Doesn't need to be anything special. The Spotify thing is a bit of a dead loss, and you know, we all miss that anchor record button. And that, as they say, is a wrap. Big thanks to my stalwart supporters over on Patreon, the Pit Crew, for their ongoing generosity. And last but not least, a big thanks goes to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.